Holly, and I'm honored to be the president of the board of directors for the Faces of Hope Foundation. So I welcome you on behalf of that today, and I cannot wait to introduce our distinguished speakers. We are here today to really focus in on the importance of Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And I wanted to share a couple of numbers with you to get started. And I thought about this, and you know, numbers are numbers, right? Just remember that these numbers are people. And these could be your neighbor, a relative, somebody you're sitting next to at the ball game, one of your church friends. It could be somebody right here in this room. Here is the two statistics I would like to share with you. Every 68 seconds in the U.S., someone is sexually assaulted. Every 68 seconds, so that's just over 1 minute, somebody is sexually assaulted. And every 9 minutes, that is a child. So think about your community and how important this month is that we are raising awareness about sexual assault. It's something we definitely want to stomp out, but we also want to help the victims, and we want to break the cycle if there is a cycle there. I told you we had a distinguished group of speakers right here. You can see them. So first off, I would like to welcome Lieutenant Colonel Sheldon Kelly with the Idaho State Police. Lieutenant Kelly will be talking with us today about the crime and ongoing law enforcement efforts around our state, what we're doing about it. He's going to share important insights into training efforts and speak to some of the investigations as well. Please take the microphone. And is this microphone good like this?
Is that right? Thank you, Carolyn. Good morning. My name is Sheldon Kelly. I'm a Lieutenant Colonel with the Idaho State Police, and it's a pleasure to speak with you here today. Any unwanted sexual contact is a sexual assault. Sexual assault, rape, sexual harassment, abuse, and assaults are widespread problems that happen in all communities and impact every person of this great state. We urge victims to speak up, obtain medical care, report the crime, and get the needed support. We recognize it is a difficult decision, but ISP encourages victims to call 911 and obtain care as soon as possible by going to a hospital where a sexual assault nurse examiner, or a SANE nurse, assists victims. ISP in the state of Idaho are committed to drawing attention to the prevalence of sexual assault and raising public awareness about sexual violence and prevention through education. Some of our efforts in this area are ISP Forensic Services is processing all of the sexual assault kits identified in the 2017 audit, and a record number of those kits were processed last year. ISP Forensic Services has set up a kit tracking system as the first fully implemented statewide system. They've been running it for the last 6 years and sharing it with literally the world at no cost to them to implement. When I talk with some of my counterparts across the country and through the years, and we've discussed this tracking system and they've heard about it, they've been really encouraged to reach out to us, and our forensic services has worked with them, and this same kit tracking system is being operated across the country. Let somebody take over here. ISP Forensic Services leadership of the ISACI group for the last 9 years. We are a model state team for the country. ISP Forensic Services hosting national webinars and presentations on sexual assault response and putting Idaho forward as a model for responding to sexual assault issues. Idaho State Police Forensic Services is working on a $3 million grant to investigate cold cases and gather lawfully owed DNA. And that is an important issue for them to tackle. Idaho is becoming a Department of Justice Sexual Assault KIT initiative site. ISP Forensic Services is attending grant funding to provide equipment for Idaho sexual assault collection centers. Carolyn mentioned that we're also working on training. Some of the training and investigations, the SANE nurse coordinator, on a side note, no other state has a forensic nurse embedded in the forensic lab or within the state police. Our SANE coordinator, Deb Weatherelt, the coordinator since 2017 has instructed 137 registered nurses through 40-hour SANE course. There are 17 internationally certified SANE nurses in Idaho. What this requires is an additional 16 hours of training, performing 300 hours of SANE work, and successfully passing a difficult certification exam. She demonstrates a high level of expertise and dedication to care for victims of sexual assault and domestic violence. Other training we are doing this week, POST, which is Peace Officer Standard and Training, virtual and live training courses are being launched for law enforcement. Some of these training courses are informed interviewing of sexual assault and domestic violence survivors, neurobiology of trauma effects on survivors of sexual and domestic violence, and understanding vicarious trauma for law enforcement officers investigating sexual assault and domestic violence. And the list goes on of the training that our forensic services has made available on the POST site. It's very great to see this many people here this morning and all the people tuning in on the web. This is an important issue, and I appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak to you today about this. Next, I have the pleasure of welcoming Ada County Criminal Chief Deputy Prosecutor Shauna Dunn, who is speaking on behalf of Ada County Prosecutor Jan Bennett today. Idaho State Police and local law enforcement work closely with the prosecutor's office to serve the community and ensure justice for reported crimes. Thank you. Shauna?
Thank you. I know Jan is saddened not to be here today, but other obligations were required of her, ones that she will enjoy less, I can assure you. But I am very proud to be here on her behalf, standing with Governor Little, our partners and stakeholders today, standing against sexual assault and for the victims of crime. Sexual assault is a particularly insidious crime. It can and does happen to people of every possible demographic, and often leaves emotional scars that last long past any physical injury that has healed. More than that, it doesn't just impact the directly injured victim. For each of these crimes, like a pebble in a pond, there are ripples in the community. Friends and supporters who feel the victim's pain and who feel less safe because that victim went through this terrible crime. Because of the damaging impacts of crimes like these, Jan Bennett's, Greg Bauer, Jean Fisher originally dreamt of a place like the FACES Center, a place with wraparound services for survivors of these terrible crimes. We're proud to stand here today in this place, which is truly a tribute to the vision of the then Ada County Prosecutor Greg Bauer and now Ada County Prosecutor Jan Bennett. It's also a tribute to the teamwork that brings a center like this into reality. The Board of County Commissioners, local law enforcement, which I'm proud and happy to see so many representatives of here today, St. Luke's and St. Al's, the SANE program that you've already heard described, as well as other medical programs housed here in this center. Adult Protective Services, the FACES Foundation, Health and Welfare, Child Protective Services, and other partners who provide services here through one door. All of these resources are brought to bear on behalf of victims of interpersonal crime every day. Because of those numbers you already heard, we have plenty of visitors. Not every sexual assault can be charged. Not every victim is willing to come forward and talk about what's happened to law enforcement. Sometimes they come here just for medical care, just for the support and resources that are housed here, and they never come to my office. But for those who do, we have specially trained and dedicated prosecutors, and we have made every effort to make their journey through the criminal justice system, which can be unnerving and overwhelming, as bearable as possible. Through special training and appointment of victim witness coordinators through, again, our local law enforcement agencies, as well as my office, people who help support them through what can be a very difficult process. But again, we are proud to stand together with our partners today to support victims and survivors, and again, committed to holding the perpetrators accountable. I would like next to introduce the Executive Director of the Idaho Council on Domestic Violence and Victims Assistance. Their mission is to ensure that all victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, child abuse, and other violent crimes in Idaho have access to quality, trauma-informed, and victim-centered services. I'd like to welcome their Executive Director, Heather Cunningham.
Thank you very much. One of the things that's great about working in Idaho is that it's a small enough state that we still largely know each other. So many of us working in this field of victim services regularly meet and talk about needs. And we had a rare opportunity last year to get some one-time federal funding for sexual assault from the Family Violences Prevention and Services Act. It was over $1 million specifically to be used for sexual assault. We had to deploy the money very quickly, and I'm pleased to say that Idaho was one of 5 states that was able to immediately put that money to good use. Thank you. Because we were already partnering with the Idaho State Police, we were able to quickly deploy a large portion of that funding to purchase Cortex flow machines around the state and deploy them in centers and hospitals. Those machines help document, with the assistance of sexual assault nurse examiners, sexual assault, and help our prosecutors and our police move forward with cases when victims choose to prosecute. We were also able to use the funding to fund a number of jobs. For example, counselors and others in service centers around the state who provide forensic exams for those children and adults who've experienced sexual assault. We're able to fund a number of SANE nurses and training for SANE nurses. We were able, again in collaboration with the Idaho State Police, to provide neurobiology of trauma training, and other training around the state, not just in live sessions, which we did all last year, but also in collaboration with Idaho State Police. We made those trainings available so that officers, particularly in rural communities where it's difficult for them to take time to travel for training, can watch that training online. We also provide funding to basically 47 programs around the state that are on the ground every day, 24 hours a day, providing services for victims of sexual assault. Those people on the ground, as well as our law enforcement and our first responders, are the ones that really deserve a huge amount of credit for being available for victims all the time. Here at the Council, we simply enable that with our funding, and we work hard to do that. One of the things in the future that I'm excited about is a partnership we have at the Council with the Statistical Analysis Center. We are working on a data dashboard which will be available later this year, where anyone can see both the rate of reported sexual assaults and the rate of reported victimizations. In other words, when we fund with our grant data and victims go and seek services, we collect that data so we know how many victims are seeking services for sexual assault. When we compare that to the number of people who are reporting that to law enforcement, we can see the discrepancies. We'll be able to see areas of the state where we have more sexual assault victimizations than reported and see where the gaps are largest and target those gaps with additional training and additional funding. For the first time ever, because we were able to change our administrative rules and look at how we can distribute money where it's most needed throughout the state, we will now, moving forward, be able to target our limited dollars where they're most needed to try and address these gaps. In large part, I attribute our ability to continue funding programs to the extraordinary efforts over the last 2 years of both our governor and our legislature in approving some one-time funding to help us make up for federal declines in victim services. Had they not done that, we would have probably lost up to half the programs in the state. As it is, we're one of the only states that has not lost any victim service programs. We can all be proud. Idaho is actually leading the nation in many ways on our sexual assault advocacy, our sexual assault services, our sexual assault processing kits. This is something we can all be proud to be doing well. Thank you very much.
You know, this is such a tough topic to talk about, even tougher to deal with. So it's kind of exciting. Governor, we're first in a lot of things in this state. Look at this now, right? We're really, as you can hear from our last couple of speakers, we are on the cutting edge, and we are leading in helping victims of this and helping to stop it. I'd like to welcome Paige Dinger as our next speaker. She's the Executive Director for the Faces of Hope Foundation. She's going to share an update about victim support efforts, public education, and also a glimpse into the future.
I'm in awe. This huge crowd, I am so grateful. Number one, I want to thank BPD for representing. Look at all of you guys here. Thank you for your support. You are great partners. I also see so many of our CARES partners. Thank you for being here. It's also Child Abuse Awareness Month, so we're in this together, and so thank you for being here. Also, I might embarrass her. Anne is our forensic nurse. Look, she closed her eyes like, please no. Anne is our forensic nurse. She does this every day. Also, I see in the back, Dr. Ashley King. Follow-up exams are just as crucial after those forensic exams. Dr. Ashley King is back there. Thank you for your support. I know that the Department of Health and Welfare are boots on the ground. I don't know if anybody's here today, but also wanted to thank the department that is crucial to the work. Also, the Ada County prosecutors, the support that they provide here in this building. Our county commissioners, we could not do this work without their support as well, and we are so grateful. I see so many other partners, law enforcement, Ada County Sheriff's Office, Garden City. I know I'm forgetting half of you, but I am so grateful. Also, I look out and see two wonderful faces, and actually, 7 years ago, I was looking up to the two of you. We've got B. Black and Kim Dugan that are here, the executive directors for organizations like ours. It makes my heart full that we are all in this together, and we couldn't do it without one another. So thank you for making the time to be here. I love you both. If you watch or read the news, it is very clear that sexual violence even happens here. Over the past couple of years, we've had some really big newsworthy stories. Last year, the Department of Health and Welfare reported that 2 in 5 Idaho women and 1 in 5 Idaho men have experienced sexual violence. That's here. That is right here in our state of Idaho. So today I want to dispel some myths. Many of you will be like, yeah, we know the myths, but I'm going to tell them to you anyway. I think we need to be reminded. Myth number 1, sexual assault mostly happens to people in lower socioeconomic classes. Shauna Dunn addressed that beautifully. Guess what? Sexual perpetrators don't care what social class or social standing you're in. People who come to FACES looking for services they come from all walks of life, all social classes, genders, race, ages, everything. They come here to FACES for help. And I've actually been asked that question multiple times. What's your typical demographic? There isn't, but we're grateful that we have places in Idaho where they can come and be believed and be supported. Myth number 2, this one I was guilty of for a very long time. Sexual assaults are carried out by strangers, typically in dark alleys, when someone least expects it. False. Studies show that over 80% of victims know their assailant. It's typically a neighbor, somebody in the family, a friend, an acquaintance, a coworker, a classmate, an ex-partner, and yes, even a current partner. even a current spouse, because no consent means no consent. Myth number 3, if you're sexually abused, you will be a victim for the rest of your life. This is why the answer is false, because there are great places like this center where we're crucial to somebody's journey. It's not going to be easy. It's definitely going to be a difficult road for these survivors that come through one door. But what I love about this place is that they have access to all of our partners. They can meet with law enforcement. They can meet with our great attorneys that we have on site. St. Luke's and St. Alphonsus work together to provide that forensic exam. For our children, we have top-notch, gold standard of medical care through Idaho St. Luke's Cares. We also know, though, that these bruises are going to heal, broken bones are going to heal, which is why it's crucial that we also take care of people's emotional well-being. Listen to this. I love numbers. The CDC estimates that the cost of rape long-term, this is after the actual sexual assault, will cost an average of $122,461 long-term for chronic illnesses. So this would be for things like headaches, anxiety, obesity, depression, asthma, difficulty sleeping. I could continue. I could go on and on. Chronic illnesses are definitely something that victims of trauma deal with long-term. $122,000. So studies show, though, that if somebody who is in trauma takes care of the emotional piece, their mental health, after this, then chronic illnesses don't seem to be as pertinent. So that's why it's really important that we provide that mental and emotional support, which is why we have 4 crisis counselors providing 4 to 8 weeks until they can find long-term support through many of our partners, including the great WCA. We also provide advocacy, support groups, case management. And the most important thing, and Carolyn is always reminding me to tell people this, no strings when they come to FACES, no judgment when they come here. And most importantly, because it doesn't discriminate on demographic, no fees. People who come to FACES come not having to worry about that bill, because we have a great community that supports Faces of Hope Foundation to care for that. We have a lot of work to do, so I am honored because we have had people like elected officials, community advocates, CEOs, local leaders, and even some athletic coaches who have stepped up and joined our campaign, which we call Not in Our Community. This is a campaign that says we do not tolerate interpersonal violence, including sexual assault. We don't tolerate it. We ask you to help us break the cycle, to help be a voice to our community and to take a stand against sexual abuse. You may have seen some of our public awareness campaigns. We've got billboards, posters, banners that are hanging outside of our building, and we are saturating social media with these local leaders taking a stand. This is our way of supporting the community. And I ask you to help take a stand against sexual assault. I love April because it really brings awareness to these issues, child abuse, sexual abuse. But we know that the journey that our survivors are on goes much longer than that month of April. So the last thing I want to talk to you about is this common question that I often get. People say, after I give them a tour, they say, how can I help? What can I do? So I'm going to leave you with one comment. Number one, well, 2 comments actually. Number one, you can all volunteer at FACES because I need y'all's help. But I ask that the best gift that you can give any survivor of sexual assault is to just listen. If you can imagine how hard it is to tell even just one person. A lot of times, if you're like me, you're going to want to come up with solutions and you're going to just want to help. Just listen. And finally, if you will just believe them that this incident happened. Don't victim blame. Because when we victim blame, we actually silence these victims from wanting to tell their story. And that's one of the reasons it is so hard for them to come and tell anybody. April is important, and I ask that you will be an ambassador for any of these organizations that support victims of sexual violence. We need your voice to be strong. Thank you.
Well said, Paige, well said. Thank you so much. I'm excited to introduce our next speaker to you. Now, it's Senator Wintrow. We are so happy to have you here. Melissa Wintrow, great pleasure to invite you up to the podium to share the importance of today. Some information as well, I believe, about the Idaho Sexual Assault Kit Initiative. Thank you. Microphone is yours.
I have to get a photo of everybody quick first.
Oh, I love it.
Oh, my gosh.
Yes.
Heavens.
You can't
Look how
even
great
see
they
all the way
look.
in the back.
Oh, gosh. Say cheese. Y'all, it is an honor to be here today. My journey on this topic began almost 23 years ago. My first week on the job as a Women's Center Director at Boise State. And a woman came in to deliver a pizza to the newspaper staff next door. And after she delivered the pizza, she stood around and she kind of stood around and stood around. And I walked up to her and I said, "How can I help you?" And sure enough, she had been sexually assaulted and didn't know what to do. My first week on the job. And here they placed the Women's Center and student activities thinking we were just going to do programs. Luckily, I had a supportive supervisor, and from that day on, I worked with stakeholders all over the campus and in the city, the Women's and Children's Alliance, the police, security, housing, health and welfare, student conduct, you name it. And we drew a group of stakeholders together to figure out how we were going to deal with this on our campus. And that lesson I took into the legislature. What a gift, what a blessing that 14, 15 years later, I was able to run for office and take all that I had learned from that into the legislature. And I remember 2015, after I sat my first session, Governor Little understands this, long time ago for you, but I was on Judiciary and Rules, and I wasn't sure of a lot of the things I was making decisions about. So I thought I better go on some field trips. One of the first field trips I went to, the Idaho State Police Crime Lab. I think I spent about half a day there, poor Matthew. And it was then that I discovered Matthew was starting with the state police, this big group of stakeholders, to really look at how we were going to process sexual assault kits in our state. And if you might recall at that time, there was a big news story that broke, and journalists actually helped enlighten us to some of the issues. And I can remember attending group meeting after group meeting. It was hard work. It was hard work. But the value in that is that every person was in the trenches working directly with victims and knew what to bring to bear on this issue. And I can remember, I think it was, maybe it was January of 2016, I called Matthew and Lieutenant Colonel Wills at the time, and they came to my little cubby in the house, and I said, "We got to do something." And of course, they said, "Absolutely," representative at the time. And thankfully, Kelly Miller, Jennifer Landis, stakeholder after stakeholder came together and we drafted legislation. And scrutinized it to make sure we had every word right. And sure enough, after rolling up our sleeves and working very hard in that legislature, you know how hard it is, we passed our first bill to test most sexual assault kit evidence at the time. We had a few tinkerings to do later. Few years later, because of the tracking system that the state police created under the supervision of Matthew Gamet, first in the country to allow victims to track the evidence all the way through the process. Wow. Wow. I mean, that's empowering for victims. You know that. When you're nervous, scared, and you've actually called the police, you've actually reported, you don't know what's going on, it's scary to call again. It's very empowering to see where your evidence sits, and it helps increase accountability, communication, and the effectiveness of the jobs that we do, right? It builds that infrastructure we need. The next year, we actually passed a bill on preservation of evidence, best in the country. Best in the country. Because why? I can remember sitting in the State House around a crowded conference table, all the stakeholders there again, just tussling through what the right timing should be. I'll never forget it. I just facilitated the discussion. I didn't come up with that. They were amazing. Sure enough, legislature passed it almost unanimously, right? Then I consulted with the team. We figured out how we're going to pay for these kits because, by the way, we were actually charging people's insurance. It was a long story, but we determined as the state we better not do that, and we created a fund that still exists to this day that now we don't have to burden police departments, we don't burden the victim, we just go there and get the money. Isn't that great? Isn't that great? That was hard work. I have Victims Comp was a great partner in that. And then a year later, we said, hey, let's look at the data based on this tracking mechanism. Let's see where we are. And you know what? We need to tweak it again, and we better test every single kit we have because we know we got to do it. And we passed that almost unanimously. Not because I'm such a great miracle worker, although Governor, thank you. But because we had everyone involved. I can remember meeting with the chairs and having a conference table full of sheriffs, chiefs, advocates there to really ring the bell that we need to advance this legislation. So the biggest thing I've learned since my journey of the first person that walked in that women's center who needed help is at the center of all of that is that person who's been harmed. And I know each of us brings to bear a different part of the puzzle. But the most important thing all of us have to remember, that person who's been harmed is the center. And we build every service, every response based on what that person needs, right? And we talk about that all the time in our field, don't we? We talk about centering victims, centering the experience of those who've been harmed. And that's not always easy. That requires a lot of restraint. That first person I helped, boy, I wanted to get in there and say, this is what you should do. But I didn't live in her shoes. I didn't know her experience. That's the most dangerous thing we can do. We have to listen to that person who's been harmed. We have to respect their lived experience, the choices that they make based on that, and then be there to wrap services around them however it is, right? And I have found that over and over in my work in this state, to the point that we actually get to the governor's office many times to sign some bills. So as we go forward, I just feel blessed. I feel blessed to be a part of this community. I feel blessed to be able to work with all of you. Let's remember, this is hard work. We tussle all the time. That's normal. We do, don't we? We should do it this way. We should do it that way. That's okay. That makes the service better. The tussle and the taffy pull makes it better for victims. But always remember, keep the person who's harmed in the center. Compassion, restraint, patience. That's the essential service that all of us give, and I have seen it repeatedly in our community. I want to thank everyone. I want to thank Matthew. Governor, we can never lose this man. He is a gem. He is a national leader, and he has kept compassion in the center with his staff and all this work. Got to keep him, Governor. And I want to thank all the victims advocates for being here. Victims Comp, and there's one person that's not here that was pivotal in all this legislation, Chief Craig Kingsbury, who's now in Twin Falls. He has been a champion. So if Craig Kingsbury's out there, Chief Kingsbury, thank you for all your hard work, and thank everyone. Let's keep moving forward.
Fantastic, Senator. Thank you so much. Well, excuse me, the next man I'm going to introduce, we know how busy he is. So isn't it amazing that our governor is spending this time with us right here? Round of applause. Governor Brad Little has been a backer of this type of month that we have, Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and he is going to today speak a little bit about what it means to the state, and then I think we might be signing something a little bit later on. Your governor of the great state of Idaho, Brad Little.
Well, thank you, Carolyn. I've been here multiple times, and as I was listening to all the speeches, we're blessed, those of us that live around Boise, to have this literally kind of first-in-class interagency, inter-philanthropy, inter-community resource that was put together by some real pioneers in public safety in Idaho. And as I think about the continued work that needs to be done there that we've heard about, it's all about how do I scale this out all over the state of Idaho. The vast majority of our state doesn't have anything remotely close to this. You heard Lieutenant Colonel Kelly talking about the POST training that's starting this week, because POST is a great venue. If we go through the law enforcement side and we go through the hospital and the healthcare side and we go through the social services side, that's what this facility right here is all about. So as we scale that up for the whole state of Idaho, this is our test tube. This is our petri dish about how we get it right and how we scale it out all over the state of Idaho. As I look at what we've done in the past and what we're going to do, we should be, and you heard Senator Withrow talk about it, we really are first in class. But the goal is a 90-day turnaround time. And that's great. I just hope the technology changes so that it is not necessary for these victims to wait for 90 days. We're 102, the report that you and I looked at this morning, we're 100 and some days right now. We were 200. The goal, the agreed upon goal is 90 days, but some of it is chemistry. Some of it is DNA analysis. I am confident with the advances that are being made in DNA analysis, we will get closer to more in-time laboratory results back, because it is absolutely justice delayed is often justice denied. And that's why and it was kind of a result of that delay that started the audit that we did, that we came up, that Melissa did so much work on, that got us to where we are today. But there were a whole bunch of other dividends that came out of that that you've heard about today. And so I'm very pleased. I think what we do at forensics is, and besides the value of forensics for sexual assault, there's a value of forensics as we build new lab capacity for substance abuse. Right now, forensics are absolutely critical to my public safety people in the fentanyl area about making identification there. And make no mistake about it, the current opioid fentanyl issue has a direct nexus to the problem that we're talking about here in this room today. It's not always direct, but substance abuse and sexual abuse, too many times they're a direct relationship, and that's why it's so important to have law enforcement here. So I want to thank all of you for what you've done. I want to thank basically the people that put this together, that built this facility that does such a great service for this and the surrounding community. Now we got to figure out through our hospitals, through our law enforcement, through sheriffs, through police, through state police, how to scale it up all over the state of Idaho so that the people that live in the far reaches of our state are benefactors of the incredible work that's been done here. So with that, I have an official proclamation from the Office of the Governor that says, whereas Idaho is committed to drawing attention to the prevalence of sexual assault and raising public awareness about sexual violence and prevention through education. And whereas sexual assault, rape, sexual harassment, abuse, and assaults are widespread problems that happen in all communities in this great state. And whereas in the United States, nearly 1 in 5 women have experienced a rape or attempted rape. Nearly 44% of women and 25% of all men experience some form of sexual violence in their lifetime. And 1 in 6 boys and 1 in 4 girls are sexually abused before the age of 18. With these numbers consistent in Idaho. Whereas Idaho is committed to educating our communities about what can be done to prevent sexual assault and how to support survivors. And whereas Idaho strongly supports national, state, and local partners, citizens in actively engaging in public and private efforts, including conversations about what sexual violence is, how to prevent it, how to help survivors connect with services, and how every segment of our society can work together to better address sexual violence. Whereas Idaho firmly believes in sexual assault nurse examiner training, developing sexual assault response teams in local communities, and training local law enforcement on proper responses and investigations into these crimes. And whereas timely rape kit processing and tracking is critical so justice can be sought for victims in thorough investigation, which are aided by accurate and timely forensic science that results in convictions or exonerations of individuals as they work through the criminal justice process. And whereas the state of Idaho condemns sexual assault in all its forms by encouraging every person to speak out when witnessing acts of violence, however small, and we support the goals of educating Idaho residents about sexual assault awareness and prevention. Now therefore, I, Brad Little, Governor of the state of Idaho, do hereby proclaim April 2023 to be Sexual Assault Awareness Month in Idaho and encourage Idaho citizens to recognize this special observance. In witness thereof, I have signed and affixed the Great Seal of the state of Idaho at Faces of Hope Victim Center in Boise on this 4th day of April 2023.
And thank you, Governor, very much. Thank you for all the support. We are going to open it up. There's a microphone right here. To any questions that you might have, we would like you to stay with the subject that we're dealing with today, sexual assault awareness. So please come up to the microphone if you have a question. Anybody? Well, if not, I'd like to do something. Thank you, Governor. I would like to do one more thing as we look at, and we're so amazed to see all the people, you know, some of you get paid to help us with this issue in our community. Some of you are volunteers. I know I have 2 of our board of directors for the foundation here today. What we like to do, when something great happens, we like to recognize it. And we do that with a standing ovation. So would you all stand up, being in here today, and give yourselves a standing ovation for the work that you do. The work that you're doing today and the work that we have to do in the future. Thank you all very much. We're going to take a picture here. Please talk among each other. But I guess I go back to this. Have compassion. We heard that today. Keep moving forward. Let's make Idaho always the leading edge in anything that we can do for sexual abused survivors. But I think one more thing we really often forget is we must believe. Oh, go ahead, Paige, come on up and tell them what that would be. We have tours available to you. It wasn't in my notes, so that's why Carolyn forgot it.
I've got your back, Carolyn.
Thank you.
If you have never been to our center or you want to refresh, we have a tour that we've set up in this area. We didn't want to disrupt our partners over on this side, so we've kind of brought this side over here to you. So we will start the tours in 5 minutes after we take the photo. So please stay if you're interested in a tour.
Again, thank you so much. I don't think anybody here feels anything different than I do. Very proud to be an Idahoan. Let's keep helping our community. Where do you want to take it?